OVD-info, this is a new generation of human rights projects after the Agora. After a long pause, very many new things showed up. This happened in December 2011, when we, if we speak formally, we are a media project who monitors political persecution. It means that we are writing about whatever has to do with detainment at public actors, arrests for political reasons, and so on and so forth. But I would like to say, not speak so much about what we are, rather than I would prefer to immerse you into the social and political context, if you will. What is the point? Why are we doing it? Then what is the idea? So to continue, I want to ask a question to understand the audience. Which of you at least have once went to visited the website OVD-info? Quite a few people. And how many of you realize what OVD-info stands for? There are quite less. And which of you have at least supported us with 1 ruble? Well, quite a big market, I would put it this way. They are linked questions because in order to... so that the support with money is actually the best kind of understanding, so that we need quite a lot of things that need to be explained.
And I will start by that night when OVD-info was created in 2011. I think most of the Russian members remember that time. The protests, rallies after a long period. I'm a journalist by background. We were detained, and I was in one of the I was detained with others. We were trying to find out what are the terms, and the policeman was not opening the door. And I met my school friend, who was a programmer, and he was looking for his friend. And we were there throughout the night, standing at the doors of several police departments, and we wanted to help our friends primarily and their relatives who started to call us and have been calling for about 6 years, and we wanted to do something. And clearly, what could we think up other than web service? A web service working with information. Our initial idea was a service to start working without our participation, because we didn't particularly like when we're being called up at 3 o'clock in the morning. But we understood that we're not Memorial, we're not Agora, we're not lawyers, we're not human rights activists, we're not actual protesters, but we are professionals in database, in data analysis, and in journalism. So we understood that the actual availability of information does help. Being in a locked up system like a police department, anything can happen to him, like in Dalny, in Kazan. And in such cases, there were political or non-political detainees, and it was difficult to find them, if at all possible. So we were becoming mediators, and the gap that we were trying to fill in was the distrust, because the activists were not trusting the activists, and the activists were moving with their agenda, and who would know if the activists are right that 5,000 people were detained at a rally, for instance. This is how it continued to develop, with this basic idea about information, and We are currently dealing not just with detainments and arrests, but all political repressions, not just in Moscow, but in all of regions of Russia, not just in express news, but also analysis and reports and different data sets which show the situation on the whole. But the basic idea is that this has to work in a systematic way, in an institutional way, quite independent from us or our partners, and that this information, this is information, data, and not politics. From that time on, this hypothesis that the primary information is of priority for any political and social problem, this hypothesis starts to be supported or corroborated, even though there's still a long way to go for the success of our service. Well, but as an example, why does this we never had lawyers and we never had much material resources, and we thought that while if we are a small website, but we are quoted every year 3,000-4,000 media, and we thought that other activists, other organizations would spring up, which would be interested in physical participation and material support. So we were always coordinating different organizations. We were cooperating with Agora a lot, and I would like to quote the case of a detained person during the Bolotnaya Square rallies, who later started the legal support initiative, deriving the information, the data from our website. There's also a case about water and food. If a person is in the police department for 48 hours, he or she must be fed and must have water. And in some cases, there are cases when we have to supply this. And the hypothesis is, of course, wider. It's just about some theory of change. And what is important here is some information. We're trying to deconstruct a system whereby a system is described in all practices and in all details. It becomes clear that is how the system works. And if it is open, if it is transparent and open information, then the system has to reform. And not only because they're illegal, which they are, but also because of the public outcry and the perception on behalf of the society, with the understanding what is a police and what is the Russian court. As an example, we have we are asking activists to go to courts. Because just as much as Pavel, we think that it is possible to win in courts, and it was very important for us to have an idea of the Russian courts, and a representation not coming from the Hollywood movies, for understanding how does this actually look. What is the view of the dogs, of the police in the courts, of the judges in the court, and this really led to huge mental changes in these activist groups, which then through social media, through networks, have been working to change the perception of the penitentiary system and the police. I shall allow for about 3 minutes to read the manifesto of the information group on prisons, which was the group created by Michel Foucault in France, and this document is a document of a phenomenal intellectual force, and this manifesto is quite relevant to OVD-info and to the to contemporary Russia, and we're indeed following this manifesto in all aspects. None of us can be convinced that we can evade prison, and today we have even less convictions. There are police cells everywhere. Convictions have again been called crimes. We are working under supervision, close supervision, and we are being told that the prisons are overpopulated. And what do we say if there are too many detainees? Prison is one of the closest black holes of our system. We have the right to know, we want to know, and because of that, together with the judges, attorneys, doctors, psychologists, we created a block of information on prisons. We want to understand what is a prison, why do people get in jail, what happens there, what is the life of the inmates, what is the life of the personnel, how do people eat, how hygiene is conveyed, what is the by order and the sending order of the inmates. We will be gleaning this information not from the official reports, but we will be getting this from people of unique experience, of their personal experience, and we're trying to get in touch with them to know as much as we can. We're not going to suggest a penitentiary institution reform, but we want the information to become public on the day when an event happens. We will be doing our utmost to use all mass media daily, monthly, weekly, and quarterly. And finally, it is important to know what is our danger, and what is the threat, but it is also important to know how to protect ourselves. We're going to be publishing a memorandum for the inmate. Those who want to ask and help can go to Rue Vaugirard, the 15th arrondissement in Paris. Well, we don't have an office in Paris, but we have a website, we have a telephone line, and we have about 80% of information which we published is based on the information supplied by the victims, by those through their relatives or through their families. In this manifesto, there is a philosophical sense introduced by Michel Foucault, which is the alteration of the style of the language by changing the subject. If previously we were talking about prisons from the standpoint of the jailer, Foucault started a revolution when we started talking about penitentiary institution or prison from the standpoint of an inmate. And OVD.info is exactly about that. It is not an attempt to talk on behalf of the lawmaker, on behalf of the legislator, on behalf of the policeman, on behalf of the jailer, but we're talking on behalf of the inmate, confiding in him, communicating to him belief and the trust, because he or she must have a presumption of innocence and the right to express his thoughts freely, and in accordance with the Russian the law, and in accordance with all the international treaties of which Russia is a party. To which Russia is a party. I cannot help. I can say a few words about Foucault. Foucault made this revolution, and I think that This has had its repercussions in with about a lag of 20 to 30 years in Norway and some other developed countries. In Europe, Foucault's manifesto helps, changes the discourse, and amasses data for further analysis. So we are creating this information field, the foundation for the change, for the reform, for the revolution, whatever you call this. It is beyond our mandate. We're not interested in performing this, but whoever the reformer is, he will be probably deriving from our work. Thank you.